Welcome back. You're watching Daybreak. Time now for the paper review, and of course you can always engage with us on the program today. But before that, we continue to update you on that breaking news that's just coming into our studios. We have been informed that the EACC have raided the Runda home of Kiambu Governor Ferdinand Waitito. They are also looking for 15 other people, county officials, in regards to graft allegations. What are the allegations? We're waiting for a statement from the EACC, which should be coming to our newsroom shortly. As soon as we get that, we will update you, but that raid is ongoing as we speak.
Absolutely. We'll find out more over that particular raid and tell you what it's all about. As soon as we know, you will know. And this is a moment where we get into the discussion, but the newspaper reviews first. Also, we'd like to hear your views on the discussion we'll be having later on the issue of state capture. We are calling it leadership and integrity. Is it as good as it looks on paper as it is in action? Several NGOs are calling for lifestyle audit. They've been calling for this for a while. How come it's not happening? The question we're asking you right now is, what is the missing link? What is the missing link in the war against graft? We'd like to hear from you, from your own experience as well. And as Kenyans, let's find some solutions. What is the missing link in the war against corruption? SMS 2242222. The hashtag we're using is Daybreak. You can also call in live 0719 777 at Citizen TV Kenya, Trevor Mbija, Waiga Mwaura, at Zinzi K. Hashtag Daybreak.
All right, let me introduce my guests. I'll start from there, right? We have Joy Mdivu, Executive Director, East Africa Center for Law and Justice. Welcome to the program.
Thank you very much.
Right next to her, I'm honored because I've never had a chance to sit on a table with him and have a discussion. George Kegoro, Executive Director, Kenya National Commission for Human Rights. Welcome to the program, George.
Thank you very much. Kenya Human Rights Commission.
Kenya Human Rights Commission.
Yeah.
Sorry, thank you for that clarification. And last but not least, Gladwell Otieno, the founder and Executive Director of Africa. Welcome as well. We're expecting John Githongo, CEO Inuka Kenya. He should be here shortly. But these are the big stories in the paper this morning.
Start at the front page of the Standard. Shock revelation of budgeted graft. Auditor General suggests government technocrats are hiding billions of shillings in suspect allocations to facilitate looting as civil society blames state capture. That story continues on page 6. And also on the front page of the Standard, Isaac to DP Ruto. Read the signs of betrayal. Double-crossing. Ex-Bonet governor warns Ruto all is not well in his quest for top seat. Cites President's silence on backing him and false support by the Greenhorn MPs. But also on the front page, hope for low-cost houses in the New Deal. So President Kenyatta is launching a financial institution jointly owned by the government and private sector to provide cheap loans to buy the houses. That story continues on page 4. But let's focus on the front page. Shock revelation of budgeted graft. And Gladwell, I'll start with you. And I know your view is that we're not really heading in the right direction. But we'll ask you the same thing that we're asking our viewers. What more should be done, in your view?
Well, in our view, a lot more should be done because what we're saying is we see a lot of action, a lot of sound and fury, but what it actually means in terms of actual progress in the purported fight against graft is questionable. And I'd like to really sort of question this headline that says shock revelation of budgeted graft. It's not a shock. It's common knowledge. Public servants, I think it was Mr. Kinyua that long ago admitted that about a third of the national budget gets lost to graft. So there's nothing shocking about it. What's shocking is the fact that, despite, all the announcements of a concerted war against graft, we're not getting very far.
We're not getting very far.
Yeah.
George, let's bring you in as well. You've come into the program this morning, even as the EACC raid the home of another governor. Is it all smoke and mirrors, in your view? What does that make you feel? What does that make you think?
It's tough. I think it's tough, and the outlook is it's going to remain tough because you can't see an easy way out of the situation. I think you've got to look at the problems of corruption also in the context of these other problems that we've had. If we emerged from the Moi regime in 2002, got into NAC in 2003 on a very strong anti-corruption program. John Githongo, who has since arrived, was a key part of that program. Then we had this major disagreement inside of NAC, starting particularly from 2005, and then the post-election violence in 2007. The anti-corruption agenda which is what had brought NAC to power, was abandoned in 2005 because the country got politically sundered. It is since then, and from then on, it became more important which side of the political divide you are in, because a divide was created by politicians, than whether or not what was being done for the people of Kenya, what was being done in the public space was for the people of Kenya. That is the situation since 2005, and we have to retrace back to that sort of situation if we...
In a sense, you can't fight corruption by looking at the current circumstances. You need to go back and understand its progression.
That's correct.
Okay. Okay.
Joy, you are in the legal fraternity. What do you make of this issue? We are going to delve deeper into that in the next hour, but it's on the front page of the Standard, so it's part of what we can discuss. What do you think is going on here? Is there a breakdown in the justice system?
Not exactly a breakdown. It's the nature of corruption, how it is done, has mutated. Before, it used to be theft here and there, you know, the chief demanding something that is not he's not entitled to, and stuff like that. It was, you know, little by little. But now we've grown into a state that has got grand corruption. So you see somebody who has the intention of stealing, he has a target. I need to get 400 million out of this budgetary year. So he works it into the budget to ensure that there's 400 million somewhere that he can account for in a budget line, but he fully intends to end up in his pocket. Now, this is not just simple theft. This is greed. This is it's a breakdown of our systems. Yeah. And I was listening to my senior Gladwell yesterday, and she said, now it's gotten to a place where the intention is no longer being hidden. It's already woven into the system, such that the system is skewed to fail. So you said we have a foolproof system, but it is only as foolproof as the rest of us don't know the back room, the backstory that is going on. So because of that nature of corruption now, it means the investigators also have to get a little bit smarter, because you cannot do the thing, okay, we go do the raid. So we pick up all the stuff, then we sit down and analyze it. But if you did not see where it was hidden, you will not find it. And that's where you end up in court, and when the matter is put to the test, it does not meet the standard that is required to actually secure convictions. So it ends up being this musical chairs. There's much ado about nothing, is what Shakespeare said. You have a lot of activity, but at the end of the day, when you distill it, you don't have enough substance. And that's the tragedy with Kenya now, because the people charge the responsibility of ensuring that the systems are solid. Are they themselves interested in subverting the system? And so it is woven with weaknesses from the get-go.
It is woven with weaknesses from the get-go. We'll get deeper into that in the next hour, as we mentioned. But joining us now on the program is John Githongo, CEO, Inuka Kenya. Welcome to the program.
Thank you very much.
I wanted to make sure I give you a minute to catch your breath before I fire a question at you. You find yourself again on the front page of The Nation. I don't know if that's a surprise to you anymore. At the very top there. And the quote is, report, Kenya is a looter's paradise. Damning report by AFRICOG indicts the state for being captured by elite systematic forces of corruption that advance the private interests of politicians, leading to the theft of public resources. As you spoke yesterday, do you feel there was anything new, either in terms of what you revealed or the reactions you got? Because I'm sure after all the media coverage, a lot of people must have gotten in touch with you.
I don't think there was anything new in terms of what we revealed vis-a-vis corruption in Kenya. I mean, we've been talking about it for decades now. The past 6 years in particular have seen you know, the greatest amount of corruption that we've ever had since independence. What's unique, and I think this report articulates in a very new way, is that we have, you know, the petty corruption, the grand corruption, politicians and businessmen skimming off public procurement contracts. That kind of corruption happens all over the world. But here we're talking about state capture, where political leaders and business people conspire to repurpose institutions, to governance institutions, to change laws, so that, in effect, the corruption is legalized because it is coming out of our taxes into the pockets of individuals who have managed to create a system that means that Kenyans are paying for goods and services directly to them that are supposed to go to ordinary citizens. And that's a unique situation. The kind of anti-corruption infrastructure that we have in Kenya, which is, I think, amongst the best on the African continent.
Amongst the best.
Amongst the best. And if talk to experts, they'll say we have some of the best laws, we have very good institutions. It is also amongst the least successful. We spend a huge amount of money on it. It's not that successful. And it's because we have reached the glass ceiling when it comes to fighting corruption using these technical fixes, sending policemen to chase governors and that kind of thing. When you have systemic corruption that is being carried out by an elite that is quietly, through miscellaneous amendments, through appointments to parastatals, in gazette notices, is restructuring and repurposing institutions to serve themselves and the businesses they own.
Is there a chance that we're giving a blanket condemnation when you say the elites? Are we supposed to point out institutions that are particularly failing? Because before you came in, Joy was talking about a lot of hullabaloo, but not enough for conviction.
I think for me, and I've been in anti-corruption for 20 years, so and we've always focused on conviction. And the big thing has always been we're not frying enough big fish. Yeah. That's always been, Kenya is talking a lot about corruption, but we're not frying enough big fish. But if you look around the world, it's not that often that big fish get fried, because often big fish have to fry themselves because they're the ones who hold power. And it's rare, even though we've seen the South Korean president thrown in prison. We've seen a number of heads of state lose power over the last 2 years due to outrage. But even then, this is not so much as a result of investigations, but as a result of political action in the streets by exhausted citizens who come out and say, we're tired of this. We've seen developments in Khartoum recently. So I think even in the most, quote-unquote, mature democracies, prosecuting grand corruption that involves senior public officials takes a long time. Whether you're talking in the UK or France or the US, the prosecution takes a long time and a huge amount of resources. So we've focused on this technical fix for 20 years, and perhaps we need to stand back and say, actually the problem all along has been political. And what we did was to externalize it, create an ethics and anti-corruption commission that is parked out there near Valley Road. But it's an institutional orphan. It's dangling there. It's not really part of the, all African countries, power sits, office of the president, security and finance. But you push this little agency out there to come and knock at the door here at Citizen to ask for a file. Even you will say, hold on, let me call my lawyer first. So, I think what's happening is the thinking is changing. The model that we've used before of using this technocratic approach to fighting corruption can only get us so far. It is slow, it is expensive, and it is ultimately disappointing. It always fails. There is no country where it has succeeded. When you're coming from a situation of systemic corruption like Kenya, without a major political reboot to give those institutions the kind of political muscle to get things done.
Which is why some have said that the best way to fight corruption is at the ballot, and that's something we'll be talking about after the break. But before we take that break, though, another big story, this one will captured at least on the front page of the Daily Nation. Binyavanga, who liked his life full of color, is dead, has passed on. And the first paragraph reads, and I quote, Kenyan author Binyavanga Wainaina, whose series of literary works won for him the Kane Prize for African Writing in 2002, and who founded the Kwani Literary magazine, died in Nairobi yesterday. He was 48 years old, and for more details, you can turn to page 3, where there's pretty much a full-page coverage of this man who passed on yesterday. And of course, this has been covered quite widely, both by local media and international press as well. I don't know if any of you had a chance to interact with him, or maybe we could just get 1 or 2 comments. And Joy, I could just start with you about this award-winning writer who was not afraid of courting controversy.
I did not have the privilege of meeting with him, but because of my evangelical work, we crossed hairs because of ideological issues. But what I know about him, and what I have read about him, and what I have gleaned about him, is a man who stood for something, and that is something in Kenya that you don't find very often. And not only that, was ready to defend it. But the thing that I admired most about him is that you could have an intellectual discussion on both diametrical opposing ends, but you could have an intellectual discussion, and at the point where you realize that there was no more convergence, you could respect each other and shake hands and walk away.
Agree to disagree.
And that is something I don't find often these days. You disagree with somebody on something and it becomes personal and it's a big blowout and you never... And that's something that I deeply respected. But the other thing I also loved is that he was very passionate about telling Africa's stories as Africans want it. And he wasn't beholden. You know, you hear Kane Prize, you'd think now he would move on to London and become a big old author. But he decided to just stay authentic. That's something I think for young Kenyans, aspiring writers, this is somebody you need to study and glean from, because Kenya has lost a great mind, a brilliant mind.
All right. George, what is your tribute to him? He's quoted a lot of controversy, like people would say, but there's a lot that is also not being seen or even being said. What would be a tribute to award-winning author?
I think the death coincides with a level of very visible organizing by members of the LGBT community in the country. There's an outstanding judgment that is coming tomorrow about decriminalization and legalization. So that movement has been growing in Kenya, but there's also, of course, a global movement around that. So one hopes that, I mean, so he was ahead of his time to the extent that the things that others are now organizing to agitate around in courts, he personally went public. So he's a pioneer. He has, through his action, through his through the way he lived his life and his outspokenness, he has expanded the frontiers of tolerance, because we are a very, very intolerant society, unfortunately. So I would view him as this symbol of an agitation for tolerance. People who don't believe in the things we believe in, people who don't do the things the mainstream does, are not accepted in this country easily, and they're not going to have an easy and comfortable existence. So I think his death calls for a reflection on that aspect of our society.
Okay. Go ahead.
What do you think, John? Because the issue that he's bringing up is a very interesting one, tolerance in the society. And you saw even online the reactions were very varied, and you'll be thinking this is a sign of a very intolerant society.
I mean, I think I'd agree with all the statements and comments that have been made. It's a very talented. Binyavanga came onto the scene as a very talented author, a thinker, a person who examined the African condition in very, very interesting ways, and is very articulate about it. And that's the Binyavanga we knew first. Yeah. And even when I met him first, it was at functions where he was really extremely impressive, just discussing our own condition as Kenyans and Africans. Then he came out later and said he's gay. But we already knew him as a writer, as a good writer who we admired and who had won prizes. And I think by doing that, made it easier for Kenyans who are intolerant people to be perhaps, I think, a bit more open and a bit more tolerant around these things, because the fact that he was gay did not suddenly make him a bad writer, did not make him suddenly a person who was not very passionate about putting forward the African perspective in an articulate way. So I think that, just the whole journey of his life helped move Kenya a big step in terms of tolerance around issues of gender and sexuality, in a way that was smooth, because, as I said, we knew him as a writer. Then he announced he was gay. Now, you could not say he's a bad writer.
Especially you called him a great writer before.
Yes. So, on record. Exactly. So, I think in doing that, he helped us as Kenyans move a step that would have been more difficult if he had announced first that he was gay, then come out as a writer. Then he'd just be the gay writer. But now he was an extraordinary writer, but also happened to be gay and allowed Kenyans to handle this issue in a much more moderate way.
Okay. We have one more topic, but Gladwell, I don't know if you'd want to just give one word before we switch gears.
I would like to add, I think I agree with everything about what an extraordinary person he was. Perhaps I wouldn't agree with the use of the word tolerance, because the implication is that there's something wrong with him, that people have to then say, well, because it's him, it's okay. So I think in that sense, you know, I would want to say that, you know, his unapologetic living of his life and living of his truth is something that, you know, probably another aspect, looking at Kenya, growing up in Kenya as a gay person, or growing up in Kenya as a young person aspiring to write, he must have served as a brilliant example to people who you know, would often be living in extremely you know, difficult conditions. So I think we have to honor that contribution that he's made to the lives of so many people in so many different ways.
All right. We'd like to get your views on the issue of affordable housing. Leave out the politics of it, because you people are not very much involved in the political issue. But now there's hope for low-cost houses in a new deal. President Kenyatta is launching a financial institution that was launched yesterday, jointly owned by the government and private sector, to provide cheap loans to buy houses. That story continues on page 4 of the Standard. But in your view, the people you've interacted with, was this well thought out? Because the idea by the government is that they're going to provide affordable housing for Kenyans. There's been an issue of the tax levy. It's been postponed now to the 29th of May, I think. That's when the ruling is coming up next. But was it well thought out?
Well, I'd have to say that to the extent that you know, I've you know, read a little bit about it. I don't know much about it in depth, but I would say that many of the projects of this government are not well thought out. But as we were discussing corruption yesterday, we talked about, and we've discussed here, you know, after looking at the Standard story, we've discussed the aspect of corruption that constitutes budget raiding, but we haven't discussed the aspect of corruption that constitutes capturing the economy. And frankly, I think Kenyans would be forgiven for doubting the motives, particularly of the president, in terms of his economic interests in this project, because you've seen that he has a great deal of, well, I don't think it's difficulty, but he does not separate between his private interests and his public office, and the use of his public office to advance the economic interest of himself and his associates and his family. So this is a much more insidious form of corruption, which consists in sort of injecting predetermined results into the DNA of the economy, so the economy will keep on producing beneficial results for the Kenyatta family and their associates. So I'm very suspicious about this plan. I don't think it's well thought out, and I don't think it's fair to tax people to provide you know, housing for this sort of scheme. Although of course we want affordable housing, but the idea, you know, the good idea of affordable housing has obviously been captured by interests, again, who we have every right to mistrust.
Okay. John, even as you respond to the low-cost housing and the launch that happened yesterday, a question that she's raised, or a thought that she's raised, in regards to the separation of wealth by a person in a political office. And let's look at 2022 and an individual X who decides to run for office then, who gets the ticket and wins and becomes president. They have possibly a small farm back up country where they're farming. They have maybe a small business in Nairobi. What would you want to see from that individual that would convince you that they have separated their personal interests from the running of office affairs? Because one gets the feeling in Africa that it's not very clear. Abroad, in the West, in Europe, you clearly see people who are directors on companies resigning or doing those sort of things. What would you want to see here to be convinced that the political class actually understand what Kenyans want from them?
I think you know, one of the unfortunate things about the manner in which the 2010 Constitution has been essentially gutted is that the first part of the Constitution that was undermined was Chapter 6 on integrity, and the whole issue of conflict of interest vis-a-vis public officials is something that we don't take seriously at all in Kenya. And so many of the scandals that are on the front pages of our papers are difficult to resolve, and sometimes almost impossible to resolve, because public officials almost seek public office so that they can do business with government.
With the government.
Yeah. And that's a huge conflict of interest. And I think the concern with the housing is that the president himself and his family have a conflict of interest in this particular area. That raises one suspicion. Secondly, the design of the design of this project, as the experts articulated, say that this hasn't been thought through. And partly it's because of the history of this administration's capacity to think through large projects. Whether we're talking about the standard gauge railway or the other projects, the many stadiums that were supposed to be built around the country, there hasn't been a single large-scale project that involves this amount of resources that has been rolled out in a manner that is well thought out, systematic, and is for the public interest and is manifestly seen to be for that. In other countries, people who are in our president's position, who comes from a family with a very diverse economic portfolio that is very, very large, is to create a blind trust and remove himself and key members of his family from engaging with government. Just to build that public trust. Right now, part of the reason this housing project is being attacked is that there are many people who are not even bothering to ask whether it is a good idea or not. There's an immediate assumption by many people, okay, there is something that the Kenyatas are eating here. Even if it is not true, people immediately assume that. That's unfortunate because it kills even good ideas.
Even good ideas. Okay, George and Joy will be coming to you after this short break, but we are due for one right now, and so we'll do that at the moment. But of course, we want to let our viewers know that you can weigh in on this discussion even as we get into an analysis of Chapter 6 of the Constitution, leadership and integrity. What is on paper, or what is happening right now, the realities on the ground. That's what we'll be focusing on. 22422 is our SMS line. The hashtag is Daybreak. You can call in as well.
Oh, absolutely. 0719777777. I want to bring up that question to you right now and sample some of the views during this broadcast. What is the missing link in the fight against graft? In your own view, what is the missing link in the fight against graft? We have some of the best laws. In fact, as John puts it, it's just been undermined. A whole chapter 6 on leadership and integrity with about 7 or 8 parts that has been broken down. It's the responsibilities of leadership, oath of office of the state officers, conduct of state officers. We'll delve into that when we come back from the